Hey guys, welcome back to Screenworthy, brought to you by The Mind Refinery. I'm your host, Kyle Bodanis. This episode, we're talking about the future of theaters and how the feature film streaming experiment has worked so far this year. We'll also get into a little content news, talk about Indiana Jones 5 and Falcon and the Winter Soldier. If you like what you hear, rate and subscribe wherever you get your podcast, and if you have time, follow The Mind Refinery on social media. And now, here's the show. Alright guys, here today to talk about the post-COVID future for theaters and streaming, along with a little content news, are Mind Refinery creatives John Neal.
What's up?
And Boyan Nedick.
Yo.
So yeah, we're going to dive right into movie news here. As we all know, there's an impending 5th installment of Indiana Jones coming up. Talented writer and actor Phoebe Waller-Bridge has just signed on about a week ago for an undisclosed but substantial role. So my first question when I hear this, and I'm throwing it out there, who the fuck greenlit an Indiana Jones movie after The Crystal Skull?
That sounds like a Kathleen Kennedy move. I mean, she paid for Lucasfilm, and she's gonna squeeze every dime out of that thing.
Let's pinch that IP till it just is completely juiced.
No.
It's juiced already. Let's be serious.
It's juiced. It's juiced. Realistically, after Temple of Doom, it could have been juiced, and then they came back. They had another one. Alas, hurrah! It was fantastic. The Crystal Skull is like one of the worst abominations I've ever seen. Despite somehow by certain critics, what does it have, like a 74 on Rotten Tomatoes? I'm like, how the fuck is that possible? And not that Rotten Tomatoes matters, but it's a idea of what multiple critics are saying.
I mean, I'm pretty sure Roger Ebert gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars when it came out, and that was the beginning of my distrust in critics.
Well, I can't really argue with that, but let's get into the real situation is here. Like, it's an undisclosed character. Who do we think this is? John, I believe you had a kind of a good idea we were talking about with this.
Yeah, I mean, well, she's British. I think the logical person would be probably a granddaughter or a relative of Marcus Brody.
What would you do if she was a Palpatine?
I'd probably be like, oh, so they're connecting Indiana Jones and Rise of Skywalker somehow. This will be interesting. I wonder how they'll tie that together.
Han Solo is related to Indy by like 10,000 generations.
Yeah, Sean Connery's his grandfather.
They live in you now.
Oh my god.
So continue, John, with your theory, because I think it's the right idea.
Well, that's the theory.
It's
that
Marcus,
she's probably that she's a relative or a granddaughter of Marcus Brody.
She's gonna help.
And my theory, by the way, is that she's already on some kind of an expedition and she needs Indy's help with something, and that's how it happens.
You should write blockbusters, John.
I should.
My theory was similar, but I also tried to envision what would Kathleen Kennedy and come up with is that and also looking at this girl and looking at obviously she's British, is that she's going to be a Nazi. She's going to be a Nazi, but possibly also his daughter. It's gonna he had a daughter with some Nazi spy, maybe. I don't know.
She's in she's in the far militant wing of the Nazi party, Hydra.
They're just going to pull a coming to America 2, and somehow he just had a kid and didn't remember it, even though it made absolutely no sense. Cool.
Yeah. On his adventures, he met another some German adventurer, and it turned out to be a Nazi spy, and this is the daughter.
I actually really like Phoebe Waller-Bridge. The show Fleabag that she's in, I thought is it's a great show.
It's really good. Like her talent is without question. Like she's someone who people are trying to bring on because she is a great actress. She's charming, funny and sarcastic, but also super talented. Was Marcus Brody in the last one? I can't remember.
No, Crystal Skull?
Yeah.
No, they had a statue of him on the campus at Marshall College, though. If you remember, if the Russians crashed into it with their car giving chase to Indy and Mutt on their motorcycle, and his head came off and went through the windshield. That was the whole Marcus Brody gag in Crystal Skull.
They're going to retcon Crystal Skull, right?
No. Good
sounds
like it's a
good question.
I read that they're considering this the sequel and the conclusion to Indiana Jones.
I mean, they should retcon it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's not very good.
Well,
I mean,
Shia LaBeouf's not going to be in it, so maybe there will be some retconning.
Maybe there'll be some minor retconning of it.
Like
Just-
removing entire characters.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't
Perhaps.
sound like they're trying to start a whole new Indiana Jones universe. You know
So
what
is
I
he
mean?
married in this? Is he married? Like that's my question. Is he going to be
Well,
married to?
I don't know. Like, I'm kind of hoping that they just don't talk about it and they just kind of pick it up randomly and he's just there by himself and he goes off on an adventure and we don't even talk about that other shit. I'm hoping that's what happens.
I'm hoping it cuts right after Sean Connery dies. So he's like, "Yep, Dad's dead. Not a lot's been going on after, but Dad's dead, all right." And I don't remember any interactions with the Russians or marriage.
No.
I hope they retcon it. I mean, Shia LaBeouf is going to be elsewhere. Remember that embarrassing Too on the Nose Wild Ones reference in the last one where he's on the fucking motorcycle? Fucking terrible. Anyways, I'm very happy that they're moving on from it. Hopefully, I mean, do we have faith this time around?
The only thing I'm going to say about that is I really, really, really like James Mangold. Like, he's really good. He's a really good filmmaker.
He is
His track record is very on point. I think I said this a while back because they've been talking about doing Indy 5 really ever since Indy 4 came out. But I think he was attached to it maybe about a year or two ago now.
Yeah.
He's been attached to this. I'm hoping what happens is, best case scenario, we get the Logan treatment for Indy 5. And that's what he does with it. The worst case scenario is that it turns out to just be they throw Harrison Ford in there to just give it some, like, a name credit to continue the Indiana Jones series for whatever their purposes are to continue it. I think it's dead personally. I'm willing to give it a fighting chance just because James Mangold is doing it. You could, even though I love Spielberg, like, I can't say enough good things about Steven Spielberg, obviously, but his heart wasn't in it. His heart isn't in it, and it wasn't in it. He wanted to end it after the third one, and it's very obvious that he did just from watching the fourth one. So I don't necessarily have faith in Disney to do something good with this, but James Mangold I do. So I'm willing to give it a fighting chance just for James Mangold.
I don't know. For me, that's not enough.
You're too cynical to give it a chance, Boyan. You're too cynical
fair.
for it.
That's fair, though.
But here's the thing: I'm cynical, and you for reasons that you're probably not guessing, and it has more to do with Harrison Ford than Disney or whoever's writing it or whoever's directing it. I think Harrison is beyond, the age, ability to give a fuck no matter what it is. Where he can act more than he can act like beyond, just being an old, bitter, grumbly old man. You know what I mean? I don't think he has it in him anymore, and he should retire. And Indiana Jones has always been an adventure movie, and the lead needs to be,
Not
young
in a
enough,
wheelchair?
young enough to be an adventurer, right? And then and what do you do when your lead? I mean, there's a suspension of disbelief, that's involved in this, where if he has to do stuff where you believe he's capable of doing to some extent, even if it's crazy and fantastical with him swinging from trees and whatnot. And that's gone when you have Harrison Ford, for me at least. Mm-hmm. So I think that's, for me, that's one reason why I think Indiana Jones should just not be made anymore, and the main one. And yeah, I don't think and the other problem is it's because it's the movie's Indiana Jones. You can't make, you can't be like, oh, and this is his kid and she's an adventurer too and she's gonna go and find fortune. Like, it's not Indiana Jones anymore. Yeah. If it's not a Harrison Ford thing.
My dad's a mechanic and I can't drive a car.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, the acting thing is a big thing, 100%. Like, what's he gonna do? Like, have adventures to the washroom 3 times a night? Like, it's just, I'm obviously, I want it to be good. I don't want to go.
That's the kid in you. That's the nostalgia. Yeah. That's the
but
kid
also
in you
it's the I'm spending my, like, when I talk about.
I'm certainly not going to pay $34 on Disney Plus to watch it.
Yeah, I mean, but like, I think my thing is that anytime I'm putting like 2 hours of my time into something, as I shuffle closer to ridding my mortal coil, I'm not rooting for movies to be terrible unless they're really James Cameron movies. That's really, and even then I'm like, I love some James Cameron movies.
Yeah.
So like, I remains to be seen. I think they're on. I mean, we're going to get into a good example of Disney next, but it's on the feature film front in pre-existing enterprises like Star Wars or the Lucas, like fucking Indiana Jones. I'm just not really convinced. Okay, let's move on to Falcon and Winter Soldier. It's making some noise as another success for Disney, taking big screen properties and creating series out of it. We're currently around the halfway point. Just want to check in on the series and what we're thinking about it. What do we think, and does this thing have a future?
I mean, I think it has a future. I mean, I found it entertaining enough that I want to see the rest of it. I don't think. I mean, obviously, it's a lot more mainstreamish in terms of Marvel and what they've released so far. It's much like most of their movies, early movies, before the big final battles and whatnot, Endgame and all that. And I don't know what it's. I mean, I don't know what it says about Marvel movies and those ones when it doesn't come off any different quality wise than their regular movies. Like it feels like I'm just watching Winter Soldier and Captain America level of movie. And my concern sort of generally with this series and what they're touching on is basically, there's in a superhero world, there's right and wrong. And that's the illusion of that world. That's what you buy into, that these superpower people are somehow, not just like regular human beings where the power is going to go to their head and they're going to use it for bad things. And it's not a world that has a lot of gray in it either. And as soon as you start putting in real sort of injustices and oppression and class and race struggles into these movies, I think you are inherently killing the superhero mythos and illusion, because superheroes don't stand up to a world where all that exists. Because what are they really fighting? I mean, if they go in to fight this terrorist who really is fighting for the common people, and I mean they're quasi government Avenger B Squad hitmen is what it comes off as. And if they're fighting any kind of real villain like that with well, not even a real villain, if they're fighting a person like that, they're fighting somebody who's fighting the real problems with the world, and they're fighting on behalf of corporations and governments. And they're like, oh, it's wrong because you killed people, is what they say to the girl. But when she performed that attack on the supply depot there, that kind of, she stepped over the line. But like, yeah, okay, you stopped a murderer by killing all of her people, but what are you really doing to fight the real problems? And that's kind of where, for me, superhero worlds fall apart.
Interesting.
That is interesting.
I actually think that's a really good point, Boyan. I think we can probably get more into that if we have time. But
yeah, we got time. Let's
just to like put it in a more succinct way, Batman. I love Batman, but as soon as you pick it apart for a second, like, why is this billionaire fighting these crazy, criminals, when he can use his money to solve the core issues of his city, and these people would not exist. Yeah. So like, if you apply that logic to a superhero, it just falls apart. They look like crazy psychopaths that aren't beholden to government or rule of law or the people, and they just go around and killing and hurting and putting people in hospitals at best, and ruining their lives that way. You know what I mean? Like, so
someone just goes up to Bruce Wayne and they're like, okay, so Mr. Wayne, I had an idea. Could you take some of your money and create social programs that work to help impoverished areas and to lower crime rates and recidivism rates? And he's just like, I don't have time for that.
I'm Batman.
I cannot do that.
Yeah. Can I do that with a gadget? What if I made this gadget? Would that solve? No, sir. We just need some funding. And
where's the Batwing?
Yeah.
Can the Batwing deliver food?
Yes. How about we make a Batwing and kill them?
So sorry, just to balance that out, I just want to say some things that I like about it first, because I actually do think, Boyan, that point is really pretty bang on. I think the superhero genre does have its limitations, and I've always really felt that way. The things that I do like about it is I am getting some Winter Soldier and Civil War vibes from this show. And in particular, like, Winter Soldier is easily my favorite Marvel film that they came out with.
Yeah, it's really good.
It's really interesting how they brought back Falcon and Winter Soldier. Bucky is a terrific character with a lot of depth and a lot of layers, and I'm really liking what they're doing with his character post Endgame with this show. The scene at the beginning of episode 4 where he's in Wakanda and they're trying to basically get that brainwashing out of his system is a really cool moment, and I thought that was just really unique how they showed that. I didn't expect that. And I also like how the Captain America is going to be the villain in the show. That is really cool. Like,
that is a nice.
To their credit, that was a really good angle to take with this, because Captain America is the new Winter Soldier. That's where they're going with this. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. That episode 4 in particular is where this show is now picking up steam because of the events that happen in episode 4. The ending where he kills that guy with the shield. Yeah, it got my attention in episode 4. The first 3 episodes, kind of doing the heavy lifting, really wasn't a great deal happening. But I also really like the actor that plays Zemo as well.
I
forget his name. I think is it Daniel Bruhl? Is that his name?
Oh,
Daniel
the one from fucking Tarantino.
Inglourious Basterds. It's Daniel Bruhl. I really like Daniel Bruhl.
He was good. I mean, he's everything he's in, he's pretty fucking good in.
Wasn't he in that German movie where him and what's her name, something Scholl, they were like the people who, like, during the time of Nazis were actually like fighting against them or were against them, and they got killed for it.
I'm not sure. I'm
pretty sure he was in that movie. He was very good.
He plays Niki Lauda as well in the movie.
Yeah,
Rush.
That's right. He's in Rush. Yeah,
and that's my. I think that's my favorite part.
Yeah.
I would say he's one of those really good casting choices.
Yeah.
Another good really casting choice where, like, he's an actor that definitely just is above this. I would say, like, he's really, really good in so many movies, and then he shows up in this and he actually makes a villain interesting.
Something it's really quite. I mean, I was really surprised actually that this was good. Because I didn't know if they were going to be able to translate it, and like the things they did with Bucky's character is really cool when he's just kind of like, he's in with a psychiatrist and they're trying to like work back all this shit that's happened to him and all that, and I haven't watched WandaVision yet, but Falcon and Winter Soldier, like, it's been decent so far. I am one episode away from being caught up. I'm not particularly worried about spoilers. If you are worried about spoilers, obviously don't listen. And I think Captain America movies were the best in the MCU. Like, of the character movies, like, even the first one was like, it was your standard origin movie. It wasn't bad. You know what I mean? It was kind of interesting. And but Winter Soldier and Civil War, or like Winter Soldier, is the best Marvel one for me. And this storyline has been really great and kind of like continued that. And I think if they continue with this arc and the way it's going, like, it'll bear fruits. And like, Boyne, you're totally right about the, it's like watching the movie. Like, and I think that was the whole point of the Falcons, that opening scene with George and St. Pierre.
And unlike Mandalorian, they don't get to like fall back on having that cyclotron or whatever it's called, right? That was like a thing that Mandalorian used to really up the quality of a TV show to almost full Star Wars cinema level in terms of the visuals. And they don't really get to do, I mean, maybe they are using the technology and I just haven't noticed, but they don't really get to do that in this. And they still have to shoot on location a lot and regular studio sets and whatnot, and I can barely tell the difference. It just feels like a Marvel movie, which isn't entertaining enough. Like, I'm not a hater of those movies because they're not super deep or something. You know what I mean? They're entertainment, and that's fine.
Yeah, I know. Like, there's some good stuff, but I mean, I think that's what the whole thing with that Falcon scene was. Like, we're just trying to kind of get you in the mode that it's going to be like, it's going to be that kind of experience just on a smaller screen. What I got from your statement, though, which I thought was really interesting, boy, and it was a really good point, is that, Bucky and Falcon are just shills for a fascist capitalist government who
But even yeah.
like even,
But it's like you know what I mean, like when you really, I mean, it's getting too far now, but when you really look into like reading it, what kind of people buy into these systems is like there's a lot of people with good intentions that support oppressive systems in the world, right, and oppressive regimes, and they think they're doing good, but like they, you know, once they don't look deep enough, and you know what I mean, and it's interesting that it asks those questions, but I doubt that Disney's gonna ever go far enough to really make that obvious, because it, you know what I mean, when oh god, what's his name, when the Falcon goes to the bank, you know, and the bank is denying him a loan, you know, based on bullshit, but possibly sort of racism, you know what I mean, it's the fact that it doesn't click in his head eventually, and maybe it does, maybe that's where the series is leading to, that you know, this is the bigger problem. It's a bigger problem. This is a bigger problem than some girl and who's basically you know, bringing supplies and medicine to you know, refugees and people who came back after the blip.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, that's the bigger issue, because that problem wouldn't exist if you know, if there was a solution for the banker and his type.
I kind of liked that scene because I think kind of the point is that he's oblivious, because he's been like living in Falcon Land, and you know what I mean, he's been like,
but it's also a bigger, sorry for interrupting you again, but it's, I feel like part of his obliviousness and part of that whole thing is that, you know, it's the after effect of this Captain America, which is kind of like this, you know, what's it called, the American exceptionalism, like Captain America is American exceptionalism, and you know, in being in proximity to him, and I feel like that's part of the effect that's on him, and
I think that's
what
actually
needs to be removed.
Yeah.
You know, from his mindset, that's what he needs to get rid of in order to realize, you know, what he really needs to do in the world.
No, I think that's a good point, and that's exactly correct. Like that's why, like, that for me is like a very, like, is the purpose of that, and it's like, for me it's interesting, but I also know what you're saying too, because it's like if they start going into things like racism and stuff like that, it's like, how does like the Marvel universe deal with that, because you're putting it up against like earthly problems and but it's also like interstellar problems, and
it's also like you know, it's one thing if somebody kills somebody or they're about to kill somebody and you go and punch them and you solve that problem by punching them, but it's another problem if, you know, there's an entrenched government and that's been oppressing a class of people, or a race of people, you know, for generations. Like, well, who do you go punch? You know what I mean, there's too many people to punch and might not even solve the problem.
These guys are just develop like a drug addiction trying to figure it out. They just, like, I will say, smoking and shit.
I will say the counterpoint though to me was that one scene where Bucky is like, he's making amends and he goes and he threatens that politician who basically he using his, you know, his him as an assassin and a hitman, she got power and she's a corrupt official, and he goes and he fixes that problem by basically threatening to punch her or kill her or whatever, or being threatening. Which is funny. He solves he solves corruption by you know, by threats of violence.
All we needed was a robotic arm. Who knew?
I feel like Disney is kind of, it's weird because, like, we talked about Indiana Jones, and do we trust them? And I'm like, no, like, I just generally no, right? But like the series they're putting out based on these franchises, again, I haven't seen WandaVision yet, but like they're kind of good. Like Mandalorian's been good. I mean, we'll see what's going to happen because there's going to be a huge flood of shows coming out. Like, they really haven't had these really running against each other yet. But
that's pretty smart too.
It is.
They're still building faith in what they're building. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but with the amount of Star Wars coming out, though, like there's a ton of Star Wars shit coming out.
Yeah, we'll see.
So we'll see. I mean, how that goes. Like, but do we have to give them credit at this point for the quote unquote blockbuster series?
Not yet. I don't think we have to yet.
maybe that's not a thing yet. Maybe they haven't created it yet. Maybe that's the beginning of something. I do. It would be, as much as it's easy for me to hate on a corporation like that for all the reasons, legitimate reasons. It would be spiteful to deny that, like, amongst all the glut of superhero series, that they're not creating some of the best stuff that's out there.
Yeah,
I mean, and
I also think, though, that at least for me, I'm really ready to move beyond superhero genre.
Yeah.
Like, just in general, just as far as what I'm consuming on these services and just what I'm looking for next. Like, I'm not taking these things seriously to the point where I'm like, oh my God, I'm like ready to fawn over whatever the hell they put out, no matter how good it is. Like, at the end of the day, it's still
We
a
fawned over
superhero show.
Mandalorian. We fawned over Mandalorian.
Yeah,
well,
like, I mean,
There's fawning.
yeah, but it's Star Wars. Like, this is a different thing. We're talking superheroes here. It's great. Go have fun with it. But at the end of the day, it's just superheroes. Like I'm not looking to just binge as much of this shit as I can. Like, if it's fun and entertaining, great. I'll throw it on and just have a watch for 45 minutes and that's it. And I'm fine with that.
I think, John, that The Boys is basically the beginning of the end. And not in like, oh, it's ruining superheroes, as in it's my response to what I said earlier about this series, and about when it gets too real. That's what The Boys is taking on. Like, what happens when you put these people, this illusion, in the real world? It falls apart.
Absolutely.
And I think culturally, maybe hopefully, on my part and your part, I think, is that hopefully we're getting to a point where this is gonna start dying down, just on a bigger scale. Obviously Disney's gonna be keep pumping this stuff out,
but from like a cultural importance, quote unquote.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. I think it's like got to at some point. I also think that a show like The Boys, that kind of satire, comes out when things are oversaturated. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where you're looking to completely subvert the situation, because I think even with, like, I don't know what the hell the next step of the MCU looks like.
No.
You know, like I just, like, there's characters in there, but I don't know how, like, fucking interesting they are.
Who's
just
the
can't
next
tell.
guy that's going to end the universe? Like, you know what I mean? It's going to get old if that.
Well, I'm wondering if they're going to Fantastic, because Galactus makes sense to me. Like, that's really the only other. There is some options.
But once you get to that scale, like ending all of reality or killing half of reality, like, oh, what's the
It's
next?
true.
How do you go up beyond that?
Yeah.
You didn't leave any. Like, you didn't leave any room in there. You know what I mean? Like, all Galactus is gonna do is come and eat the planet. That's what he does. He consumes worlds. But, like, so you've already hit this high watermark of villainy with Thanos. So what are you going at next? And also, like, you're getting to some of the B Squad characters. Like, Iron Man's gone, Captain America's gone, and there's not many other super fucking, like, ones that I think can carry an entire, IP.
Not on the Marvel side.
Not on the Marvel side, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not at least until they start dipping into, like, X-Men and shit like that. Like, that's really, and like, but in terms of what is in the established universe already.
Yeah.
I mean, I could watch a few more Spider-Man movies. I think this run of Spider-Man with, what's his name?
Tom
I
Holland.
can't remember. Tom Holland. I think I like it. I think he's a really good actor for this. Like, this is a perfect role for him. And I could stand to watch a few more of those, but of the big tentpole, major Marvel characters, I don't really care anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they fucked up the X-Men IP now.
Oh yeah.
Like,
Well, that's
so,
Fox.
Yeah.
like, it's just like Age of Apocalypse was just outrageously terrible.
Yeah. 100%. I think he probably was like, you're going to put this movie where, after the amount of work and time we went and put into this thing and money so we could make it big screen perfect? You're going to do what now? Well, if that's the case, I'm going to fucking go Grossman all over your ass right about now. That's 100% what happened.
Yeah, I don't. That's the thing. I doubt that actors have that much power.
I mean,
I
Tom Cruise?
really do. Well, Tom
Mission
Cruise.
Impossible, Top Gun.
Yeah, but he's a one movie man. Look, I really
No,
I don't I
disagree with
think
that.
I don't.
here's the
think
thing.
so.
I think these studios have a lot of assets tied up, a lot of money tied up in the whole theater system, and if they really wanted to make a Titanic change, and if all the studio heads got together, and there's really not a lot of them to there's a few of them, and it's easier for them to agree. If they really wanted to do that and they saw money in completely changing the system, they would do it. The fact that things are turning around pandemic wise, or at least seem to be, I think is more has more to do with that. Which, because if they buy into the whole just streaming and only streaming, and completely give up on cinema, like live, not live theaters, then that's a lot of money that they're also giving up on. No matter how much it costs, that's a lot of assets that they're giving up on. So I think this turnaround in the pandemic has more to do with that than Tom Cruise. And I think if basically, I mean, the only way I would believe that actors had that much power was if
He's not
all
just
of them
an
got
actor, by the way. He's not just an actor.
I get it, but like if all
He's
these actors who are also producers and whatnot, if they all got together and said "fuck you" to the studios and made their own thing, then I would believe that they had that much power. But I don't think I don't know. I doubt that this is, oh, Tom Cruise said this, so we're gonna do this.
I don't think it's solely because of that. I definitely think it's part of it, though.
I think it's a
definitely
big
think
part
it's-
of Paramount's narrative.
Yeah, Paramount's, not necessarily Warner Brothers with Dune and Matrix.
Yeah,
and,
like those are
and all
different.
that.
I would say those are different situations in that, like, for example, well, first of all, I would have my question is, other than filmmakers, well, first of all, more than filmmakers, who guarantees the draw on most blockbuster films?
Yeah, it's talent.
The
Yeah,
talent,
obviously.
right? So if all of a sudden, and also Mission Impossible props up Paramount. Like, Paramount doesn't have a ton of other, like, Warner Brothers is probably the most powerful studio outside of Disney in terms of like sheer IP and the films it's representing and all this kind of stuff. But Paramount, like, they need this stuff to do good, and Tom Cruise is producer on it too. You know what? I wouldn't even be surprised at this point if he has Final Cut as a producer, because, well, he would. He probably has worked his way in to have editorial authority, because he's like, why am I going to do that? Like, this guy is doing his own stunts and producing. If he were to leave to make a point of something, I'm going to tell you right now, one, I think Disney scoops him, like, right away, grabs him, and like, you can't be losing that. And also, actors follow, and on the other side of it, like, actors follow filmmakers.
Yeah.
So if a filmmaker like Chris Nolan or Denis Villeneuve's like, we're not going there, then actors who want to work with him, who are among the most talented in their craft, will want to work with him, and then you have a fucking huge problem. So they have a lot of, I mean, it's a push-pull thing, because the studio has power 98% of the time, but then that 2% is when a filmmaker or an actor hits like critical mass and is required to put asses in the seats.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's the sole thing.
No.
I feel like when it comes down to, does an actor keep getting work on these kinds of movies? If it's between his career or her career and standing up for theaters, I just don't think that these actors have the courage to actually stand against that and stand against the studios. If the studios really wanted to push streaming and completely give up on theaters, I don't think these actors, especially the established ones who fought so hard to get to where they are and have all this money as a result of this system, would actually fight that.
I just
don't have proof.
Tom Cruise has just been a vocal, like, to the point of being a psychopath about, I would say worse than maybe even Chris Nolan, about this needs to stay in the theater. First of all, I think since he's tiny, he's worried about being on a tiny screen instead of a big screen where he's much taller.
This just in, Napoleon Complex saves.
Oh my god,
cinema.
100%.
Saves
So,
cinema.
like, Tom Cruise is an example of someone where I would say I would put my money on that not being true. I would say most other actors, there's certain actors who can afford to do this and kind of do whatever they want, because at this point, like, okay, you're going to streaming, I'll just go to a better streaming service.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But I mean, like as I said, there's probably like another like there's I mean, being the studio exec who has to tell him that would be fucking amazing.
Yeah.
He just channels Les Grossman every time he's talking to these studio execs.
Yeah. Take
But
a step back.
How much do you think though? And John, we'll start with you. How much do you think that affects decisions? And I'm not saying anything to push leverage and stuff, but like we're at a time where people are trying to grab talent, so you got to be making the most attractive deal. So how much do you think the way these things are released, whether it's on streaming or on the theater, in the theater, affect, actors' decision making?
I mean, I think it all comes down to really, or at least it should all come down to the material and sort of what the intention is behind it. Like, I mean, it's one thing if we're talking about a series because, then obviously streaming service is the way to go. But if we're talking about movies, more often than not moving to a streaming platform, I think you are going to have some actors, at least the ones that can afford to turn down certain things, turn down more of them to appear on big screens more. I do think that. But to what Boyan said earlier, when you're in a position to not turn down anything, you're going to take whatever you can get.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a little bit of both. I would love to see more actors and filmmakers talking about, keeping cinema going. I think the studios should have an obligation to promote going to the cinema more than they do. But yeah, like I think it's going to be a bit of both. I think it's going to be people that can, pick their projects more carefully will lean towards more of the cinema side, and those that can't will just take whatever they can get. That's what I think.
Can I throw in my fantasy hypothetical
Here it
into
comes.
this? No,
Here
this
it
is
is,
a good
guys.
one. This is a good one. It's
This
basically
fucking better be.
my fantasy is that the studios will really want to push this streaming thing, and they're all gonna be on it together, and they're all gonna have their own services, and all the major talent and producers and whatnot are gonna say fuck you, and they're gonna break off from the system completely and start doing their own thing. They already have money, they can start their own studios. They just have to, and all these theaters are going to be up for sale because these streaming services, these studios supporting streaming services, are not going to give a fuck about them. They'll buy them up, and maybe we'll see a second renaissance of Hollywood cinema. A second, 70s era renaissance of that mid budget. Maybe auteur type movies, or that's my fantasy in this situation, is that they say fuck you to the big studios because they're going to TV, basically they're going to streaming, and they do their own thing and they do it better.
Yeah,
but I don't think that's I don't think that's going to be the reality at all.
I mean,
I just would like it to be.
Yeah, the only thing I will say that's kind of positive about the whole streaming service thing and the studios is that back in the 70s, when we had this renaissance of these young filmmakers, it was the films were shown in the cinema. Now it's all the young filmmakers are finding a place on the streaming service first.
Yeah, it's more accessible.
I would definitely throw in there from a
right?
historical standpoint the Sundance generation as a second renaissance, because then it changes from like going to the Sunday matinee or whatever to like the idea of like festival culture, and then from there streaming.
Yeah, that's fair. I guess in terms of like the opportunities that were presented in the 70s when the studios were being sold to corporations that had no idea how to make a movie, so they hired a bunch of young kids to produce all this, to let them do whatever they wanted and fucking change the game. We're seeing that now, but with a streaming service type deal. But like, I mean, obviously, I want cinema to be here forever. Nobody, I don't think, really deep down wants it to go away. Like, there's nothing like seeing an awesome flick in the cinema. There's nothing like it.
And almost, I mean, on average, I would say it's content that's been created and owned by creatives tends to be better.
Yeah.
Not always, but tends to be better.
Most of the time.
And I think it would be a great improvement if more artists actually controlled and owned their own content. You know what I mean? And there would be less exploitation of these people.
I definitely agree with that. because at the end of the day, even if you're an actor, you can pay for your labor, right? If you don't own points on things, and there is, certain advantages and disadvantages, mostly disadvantages to just that, which is why actors are always trying to like get points on back end, own pieces of the IP. You see that in series too, people trying to, own parts of the IP. I mean, at the end of the day, I think that, people are going to work where they're going to work. And I think one of the big things that's going to happen is that, like, one thing I like about streaming is it's basically returning the mid-range movie, the mid-budget movie, a bit. And it's like, because the studios are risk adverse, they're looking for tent poles, this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And, streaming is where, like, a movie like Roma, that wouldn't have been made, even like, or like Mank, right? Like, how does Mank get made under any other circumstance? So I think it's like, I mean, the big thing for me is, what is the relationship between streaming and theater? And going to the theater. Because you have to because if studios are becoming risk averse, well, not becoming, are completely risk averse in terms of mid-range, pre-existing IP, then you may have to look for streaming in the long term, in the even longer term, in terms of like where to get that fix from. Because I mean, one thing that the Sundance generation kind of taught us here is that the $20 million movie can be fucking completely awesome, but it's kind of largely gone away.
Well, I think that's more of an issue I have with the studios than anything else. It's like they still should be not risk averse. You're a fucking movie studio. Like your job is to, I understand it's a business, but at the same time, you're in the business of making art. So, I mean, the whole point of making art is to take risks. And to do that. And I get it. Like, whatever. We're talking about, in some cases, tens of millions of dollars, hundreds of $1 million, whatever. It's still the business that you're in. Take a fucking chance. You know what I'm saying?
It's like, movies and restaurants is like, if you wanted to make safe money, go do something else, right? Go do something that is never gonna, like, be not essential or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, if you're in a restaurant business or in a cinema business, you're doing it. There should be some passion, some intention, some, some understanding that it's inherently a risky thing, and I think that some of that has been lost.
Well, the problem is that they're corporations, and corporations are completely risk averse. They're
beholden to shareholders.
And like George Lucas had you remember the George Lucas interview with Charlie Rose where he talked about how how a big corporation is basically the antithesis of what a movie studio is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or it's basically like, we've done market research and, we've discovered that if we, send the filmmaker out to just bet on red instead of, betting on black, 6 times out of 10, the return comes back or whatever it is. So you're not allowed to bet on black. You can only bet on red. And so that's where the whole risk thing comes in, is they've tried to project their way into success by not taking risks. And, it works out, I would say, just a hair more than it doesn't work out. You know what I mean? And that's kind of the situation that we're in right now, where the majority of movies that we're seeing in theaters are films that already have a built-in audience, aka superhero films and fucking, Star Wars and all this stuff that's already been around, right? So
I wonder. I think we have similar, theater habits when it comes to going to the theater, right?
Mm-hmm.
For me, it's I'm either going to TIFF Lightbox to see old movies or to see foreign movies or something like that, or I'm going to see or I'm going to Scotiabank or whatever Cineplex to see some kind of massive, like a tentpole or like a big epic that I can see on IMAX or something like that. And like I just wonder if we're a niche when it comes to that, or like if we're a small percentage of theater goers that go to the theater for those reasons, or if we represent maybe a more common sort of audience. I just don't. I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I think we're a minority.
I
in that
think
sense.
So.
Like in that
do you
sense,
think people either just don't go to the theater anymore, or they go like?
I think we are
pandemic?
I think we're 1/3 of theater goers.
Right.
I say at least 2/3 of theater goers are going to see the big shit, but we're not, like, we're seeking out stuff. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Like we're not, like, I don't consider myself to be a member of the general audience, and I don't
Yeah.
think you do either, right? So
But see, they still release, movies that, again, not counting this pandemic, they were still releasing movies that now when we talk about it, we'd be like, yeah, I'm just gonna watch that at home. I'm gonna stream that. Like, I'm not gonna go watch where the fuck, like, some basic comedy or some mediocre movie. You know what I mean? I'm not gonna pay money to go to the theater, but they're still putting those out, or they were still putting those out fairly consistently and giving them theatrical releases. So who watches those movies? And is that like a non-existent audience basically? Is their money just not even worth it?
Well, things like romantic comedies and like those, some of those movies that you're talking about. I mean, we're looking at romantic comedies or like the general comedies again that were in a certain price range that would come out, and studios could always expect people to be going to them.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And
or like family movies probably fall into the same thing.
Yes, another thing too. But now, like, I think people can assume that they're going to come out on streaming now because, again, like the mid-range budget movie comes out on on streaming now. And yeah, a lot of the some of the basic ass shit is like that stuff's even too risky for them, so they just kind of put it to the side. What I want to know is, guys, is just to contextualize this, like, what do you think the relationship ideally for you is between film and streaming? Like, what flicks go on streaming? Which ones go to the theater? Like, where's the overlap? What do you think?
I mean, I think I kind of touched on it with my previous, discussion about what kind of audience we are. Is that, like, yeah, I've got kind of like a cinephile. I'm a cinephile type audience member, right? So for me to go to the theater, it has to be something that was certainly created to be seen on a massive screen, like with purpose. You know what I mean? Like an epic, either a Christopher Nolan type epic, or I'm kind of at a loss for saying it now, but like something that just really needs to be seen on a big IMAX screen. And if I look through my tickets, I almost don't, other than TIFF Lightbox, like I said, I almost don't go to movies unless they're on IMAX. And usually the ones that I do go to are not just IMAX because it's like 3D or some crap like that, but they're epics in that sense, where they require that kind of screen. And then streaming is just comfortable and easy for everything else.
This is part of like a bigger issue, which has been going on for years as well, which is the rising cost of ticket prices at the theater and the rising cost of food, popcorn, and shit at the theater. Like, Boyan, am I fair to say that the reason, in order to get you out of the house to go see one of these things is partially also because it costs $20?
Absolutely. I was going to say convenience is a huge factor. Like, not every movie deserves my time and attention to, not just to go see it, but for me to go get out of the fucking house, plan my day, or make sure, call my friends and all this stuff. It's, it's got to deserve that. And I, with streaming, with so much stuff, so much good stuff that I can just watch at home.
What about the cost of a ticket? Because that's kind of what I was pointing to.
Well, see, that's where it kind of it's offset, because it to me, the time and effort it takes to actually go see it is somewhat of a bigger problem than the cost of it, because these movies that make me want to go and see it in the theater come along so rarely. I don't mind spending the higher price on them. Mm-hmm. Now, if I didn't have streaming and and the prices were that high, I would be pissed.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, for me, it's kind of like, I tend to agree that in order for me to go see something, like, it's got to be an experience. It's got to be, it's got to transport me, and that's what a film on the big screen should be like. But then I point to two, very memorable experiences of going to the cinema to see two completely different films. Obviously, Fellowship of the Ring, when that first came out, I knew nothing about it. My mom was like, let's go. We got to see this movie. I don't care if you don't want to go see it. We're going. turns out to be the greatest cinema going experience of my life. I was 13 years old. It changed everything.
Same, yeah.
The second experience was going with, I think, a few of you to the Scotiabank Theatre downtown Toronto to see Pulp Fiction. And it was a packed house. The film is 20 years old, right? Yeah. Everyone's seen it. And the audience was absolutely electric. I have never been in a theater that was that much fun to watch a movie in, and the film is 20 years old, you know? So, I mean, it's like, like in order for me to go to the theater now, it's like there needs to be a reason to draw me to go. And part of that is the cost that it costs for a ticket. And it's like, it's like we live in a different world now where we have all this media and technology at our fingertips, as opposed to the 1930s when it cost a nickel to go to the pictures, when there was no television and no radio, and that's
you
the
had
only
not much else
thing.
Better to do if you wanted entertainment.
Right? Yeah, so that's what you did, right? Like, obviously it's a different world now, but I mean, there's still, there's always going to be that balance where it's like, the thing that I remember about going to the movies the most, and that I still take away, is that I just want to be transported when I'm there. I want to have an experience that is going to want to bring me back again. And that's the challenge, I think, now for filmmakers is they have to they have to make me want to leave my house to go see what they're putting out, and they have to give me a reason.
It's a lot of pressure.
It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah. Imagine thinking about this way as a filmmaker. You never want to make a film again with that kind of pressure, because it's like, oh, so I made if I don't make a movie good enough, and you went to see it because you thought it was going to be good, and you paid all that money and you spent all that time, and you fucking hate it, you're not going to want to come back to see one of my movies ever again, which is true for me for a lot of filmmakers who like. They go on my maybe cautiously I'll stream it, and if you gain my trust again, maybe I'll see it in your next movie in the theater again, but probably not.
Yeah.
I mean, I like the convenience of being able to watch Judas and the Black Messiah in the comfort of my own home. I mean, but it was like such a great looking flick, and there's big rally scenes, and Daniel Kaluuya is, in front of this audience, and his charisma, and like I would have liked to have seen him 20 feet tall doing that performance.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know if we've learned enough about the market yet because like at the way it is right now, if you're a theater, the economically prudent situation, even with these ridiculous box offices that you get, at the end of the day, the fucking theaters aren't in your ecosystem. It's not part of your vertical integration. It's something they never cracked into, and very few companies have a stranglehold on that business. But like viewing prices and like getting your movie in theaters is expensive, and it's money that leaves your wallet as a studio. So that is why I believe like they're going to push them. For me, a lot of the movies that we talk about liking, and I'll go, there's several filmmakers that I'll go to the theater for. Jordan Peele, why can't I remember his name? Wes Anderson,
Tarantino,
Tarantino, PTA, all this kind of shit. Like, I feel like I've been at those films, but I mean, a lot of the filmmakers around that budget level, I mean, I've like series television has kind of taken that over.
Yeah. And here's the sad thing, and you brought up a really good point. The sad thing is that there are movies that are solely coming out on streaming, like Judas and the Black Messiah, that you really like. You wish that they at least had a chance to go for a chance for you to see them in theater, because some of them like are so pure, glorious cinema that you've really just, even if they're not like Lawrence of Arabia scale epics, some of them you really kind of want to see in the big screen. They just you want that experience. And I mean, even the filmmakers themselves are kind of robbed of that. I mean, it's one of the few, not one of the few, but one of the great experiences of just seeing my own stuff shown in a theater, whether it's a short or something, was actually seeing
it's a thrill. It's a thrill.
Response from the audience, a response you didn't expect, a good one, a bad one. You know what I mean? That's like the feedback loop of that doesn't exist anymore for a lot of filmmakers.
Also, the whole Denis Villeneuve, Chris Nolan thing, I feel like, having thought about it and thought about the position that the studios were in when they made the decision to do a half and half thing, I feel so bad for Denis, because I mean, Dune on a fucking laptop.
Yeah.
God.
Come on, man. Like,
Dude,
I
even
mean,
my big screen, like, no, it's
No.
I need to.
No, it's not. That's
I
not,
need
it's
that
not big enough.
sound. I need to.
No.
I need to feel like I'm on Arrakis, because the sound of the sand is so fucking loud that it's like penetrating my goddamn soul. I need
Like,
that.
at the end of the day, one of my favorite things to do. I keep saying at the end of the day. I gotta stop saying that. We gotta put it like an end. I gotta put an end of the day jar. I feel like I listen. I'm not as, upset by it all the time. I want cinema to live, but I also really enjoy just like blasting through movies on my couch. You cannot see Dune on the fucking couch.
no.
Like you can't. That movie is meant to be on a large stage, and you're supposed to take it in. Like, imagine if the first time you saw that, Blade Runner 2049 was on a small, like, we need to see it on the big screen.
That's what I mean. And like,
It's not the same fucking thing.
it's like, okay, fine. So like, you can take in the story, but you're not getting the experience that,
what that
is
is?
intended there.
You know what the equivalent of that is going to a steakhouse, getting a 90-day aged fucking steak and getting it well done. That's what that is. It's just it disrespectful to everybody who worked on it, to the animal that died for it. Like, it's awful.
Do you know
and it
what
doesn't give you the
prefecture
full
this is from?
experience. It doesn't give you the
Yeah.
experience of what it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
Buddy, this was massaged by this Kobe beef was massaged by people for 90 straight days. No,
Yeah.
I completely agree. Like, at some time, like, we're in the Warner thing. Like, how do you think it's gone for them so far with their releases? Like, have we really learned anything new about the market? What's the long-term effect? And what the effect on the relationships with the filmmakers is going to be?
Yeah, well, like, I mean, I just know what some of the most important filmmakers today think. Denis Villeneuve, you read his statement. It was 10 times worse than what Nolan said.
Absolutely. Do you think, though, that it will cause them to make different decisions about where they're going in the future?
Yeah, if it continues like this, yes. Like if you're asking Denis Villeneuve to come out and do a Dune scale type of film, he's going to be like, where is it going to be shown? Is the first question he's going to ask. Is it going to be on my laptop, or is it going to be in the cinema? And if it's on my laptop, see you later.
Yeah, it's gonna be like fucking Tabernacle. We can't fucking put that fucking there.
So
I'm out.
Yeah. I think,
And rightly so.
yeah, definitely. And I think what it comes down to is that, we know no matter what, corporations are going to filter every choice through what's best for their bottom line. And I think the going to streaming choice was, and of course, when it does affect their bottom line, it's a very quick action, relatively quick turnaround to their industry is, we're going to do all the streaming stuff because of this pandemic. But what it comes down to, now that it's possibly ending, at least in the US market, is what you said is like, yeah, if Denis Villeneuve, or some other, or like a Tom Cruise says, no, I'm not going to work with the studio because they're going to put my shit on a streaming service. I'm not a fucking TV actor. They're going to go to another studio. And that's where maybe that, capitalist free market competition comes into play, which is if another studio sees, oh, there's money to be made because all this talent is coming to us because we're still going to release stuff in the theater. Well, then, the bottom line comes, that becomes now a risk for the studio that went streaming. So
I think that's a good point.
Maybe like the Tom Cruises and Denis Villeneuve's and Christopher Nolan's, maybe they will break the studios into two lines of like streaming or theater release, and maybe that's a good thing.
I think that's going to be the carrot. And I was interrupting because I had that thought that it could be like become the carrot that, like, for example, what Netflix uses in terms of artistic freedom for series writers. You know what I mean? We'll stay out of it. You have your showrunner, you do your show, and people fucking like that. Just make sure you deliver it to us, and that's why they're able to like get Ava DuVernay to sign a fucking long-term deal and all that kind of stuff. And I think that this idea of theater release could be that equivalent in terms of where content creators want to go.
Having said all that, that all comes to a screeching halt if the pandemic, goes to evolves to if COVID evolves to something else, mutates again, goes beyond what vaccines can handle, and this nightmare just keeps going, right? Because then what are these people going to do? Like, either nobody's ever going to see their movies again, or they're going to put people at risk to go see it. Like, you know what I mean? This possibility we're talking about, where maybe these content creators now have some leverage over these studios, might not happen if this pandemic gets worse. So let's, hoping for the best. But
yeah, I mean, that would be the worst case scenario, and hopefully it doesn't come to that. But I mean, I do think that the pandemic, regardless, has changed this. I think, especially with some of the, like, I think we were talking about it a little bit on the podcast that we did about the Snyder Cut with Omar, about how, just from the success of the Snyder Cut's release solely on a streaming service, and the amount of people that watched it, it does have big implications for what they're going to put on streaming services. My hope, because I'm not anti-streaming service at all, I'm a big fan of a lot of the series I've seen. It's definitely given creatives a chance to spread their wings, to really develop some interesting material. And I think at the end of the day, Kyle, put one in the jar.
I got fuck.
I think ultimately it should come down to the material that you're working with, and if the material is good enough and it's good, the audience will go and find it, regardless of whether it's on a streaming service or whether it's in a theater. I'm just hoping that the studios and the creatives involved have the foresight to understand what should be in the theater and what shouldn't be, and that we still have this amazing thing which is going to the cinema to see to see stuff. That can end. That's all I want.
Yeah.
We can have both worlds coexisting peacefully as long as they're both still around.
Yeah, no, I agree with all that, and I don't know if they have the foresight. They haven't proven to have that too much in the past. And one of the things that I don't think they have foresight on, and what I want to kind of comment on in this, is that I think there is a bubble that's going to, like the tech bubble kind of, but a bubble that's going to burst when it comes to streaming services. I think studios are with all these like now brand new streaming services competing for everybody's dollar, and sort of the devaluation of content by having so much content on these streaming services like Netflix. When we started the whole streaming service thing, I think they're going to discover that there is a limit to how many streaming services people are willing to pay for. There's a limit to, how much content, because like once you're buying into a streaming service and you're using it, if you're careful about like, hey, I'm not watching this anymore, I'm just going to cancel. If you're smart about that as a consumer, what that means for them is that either they have to be creating so much content that it's insane, or they have to make it cheaper, which is going to devalue what they're making, or they're going to ultimately, like you said, as you said, ultimately, what it's going to happen is that people are not going to go to these streaming services. They are going to ignore this content or get it in other ways, maybe by not paying for it or waiting for it to come to Netflix or something like that. And these other streaming services are going to die because they can't compete. You can't have 20 streaming services all trying to pump as much stuff as possible that'll make you keep coming back to them.
There's absolutely going to be media convergence, in terms of this, because they can't all exist. Things will have to start buying each other.
No. And it happened in video games, by the way. Steam started it, and then all these companies started making their own digital stores, and then eventually they discovered, well, we just can't keep as many people like buying stuff here because we don't have enough as a studio to provide all the content that they want. So now they're coming back to Steam. and they're cross-sharing subscription services between each other.
Yeah.
So if you pay for one, you also get access to another one, which is
This is why I think the landscape is going to change, especially probably in like 5 years when these start going away. Certain ones won't, Disney won't, Apple won't, just sheerly based on the fact that they just have so much fucking money, and that like this isn't a primary thing for. I think Netflix will still be around, although I mean Netflix doesn't have this massive. It's not like Apple or like Amazon or something where there's this company behind it that does a bunch of other stuff. I mean, they're kind of, tied to their business model. But I think at the end of the day, I think they're putting together good content. I mean, we haven't had media convergence yet, which is inevitable because there's so many, as you're saying, there's so many streaming services like the Paramount. I didn't even know Paramount had a streaming service, right? And that's a huge fucking studio. Maybe I'm an idiot, but I generally follow this kind of stuff. I think the point is that everyone just kind of has one now. So you're going to get all these different streaming services, and they're going to get purchased. They're going to be enveloped. They're going to be, we don't know what is still going to go on with sports and how that's going to affect things, and that being entering, esports as well is gonna that coverage is gonna kind of factor into this whole situation. So there's a lot of stuff still to go, but I just right now how many are you guys subscribing to right now? I'm doing fucking HBO through fucking Crave. I'm doing Netflix. And I have an Amazon. But here's the thing about why Amazon was genius, because like I have Prime, so I have Amazon.
Yeah, same. I do also still pay for Disney Plus, and that was one of those services where I was like canceling it after Mandalorian was done, but now they're actually releasing stuff that makes me want to keep it going.
I know,
so.
Fuck them.
And they added, was it like Stars or something?
I've got 4
for free, which is it helps because it has some good older content.
I was doing Criterion for a bit too.
Yeah,
I think I had Sundance for a bit, but I literally watched maybe like 2 movies.
Whoa.
Sorry,
that's that's intense.
What about you, John?
Too? Holy shit. I have 4. I got Crave / HBO, Netflix, Amazon because I have Prime, and Disney Plus.
Yeah, no,
and that's it. That's my limit. You get 4.
I
and that's
also have
it.
Apple because an iPhone was purchased in the house, but I'm not going to say anything bad about Apple because they employ me.
That's fair. I guess like Apple will be an interesting one to see sort of what else they put on there. Like, I mean, I also just think I haven't been on my radar just because they don't really have enough to make me want to buy it. That's the only thing.
Yeah, I definitely think
Apple.
that they have to really kind of catch up in that term, in those terms. I also don't necessarily think their like user interface and UX is particularly great either. So I think there's a lot of uphill climb for them. But the thing with them is you can't really bankrupt Apple. So they're not worried about what's going to happen in the long term. It'll just, I mean, they're moving their business model more to services anyways. So it's, or already in the thick of that. So it's hard to say what's going to happen in the future, but I definitely think there is going to be some crunch, and it's going to be a lot different than we think it's going to be.
It'll be interesting to see when there's just way too many of them, what happens, because at some point people are going to be like, well, I'm not paying.
And then libraries will get purchased and things like that.
You can only it's the same audience of people. You can only fragment the audience. So either you have niche services that only cater to certain tastes, right? Which is, I don't think that's going to happen because it's a very expensive thing to have your own streaming service. And if you can't do that, then you're really sharing audiences with each other. You're sharing the general audience, and the general audience only has so much money to spend on all these streaming services, and also like so much patience. Like, I got to log into this one and then this one, and then what if for some reason this was logged out? I got to switch this. Like it's so clunky sometimes, especially if you're going streaming it, casting it to your TV from a device. It can be sometimes clunky to switch from one to another.
You don't save your passwords, man?
I have one password.
No,
Go
I mean,
to
like,
it, hacker.
I'm just saying, if I'm
go to it, bots.
regardless of that, but I'm just saying, even just if I'm logged in into all these services and I'm using my phone to cast it onto my TV, like even just that time between each is just annoying. It's a clunky system, and I can't wait for
we
these things to converge
literally
It'll be
went
interesting.
from a system of way too many multiple channels for an expensive model to way too many channels in an expensive model again. So on that note, hallelujah. Guys, we got to get going. We're going a little long. This was really great, and we'll see what happens.
We will.
All right, see you guys.
It's a pleasure. A lot of fun.
Peace.